When it comes to buying property, most people prefer to do so on a freehold basis. For non-residents and overseas investors, there are quite a few countries in Asia where you can find real estate available for freehold ownership. Today, we're going to take a look at exactly which countries offer freehold foreign ownership. Now, before we jump into those countries that offer freehold foreign real estate ownership, let's take a look at a few of the places where you're only going to find real estate available on a leasehold basis. Obviously, the most notable country that only offers leasehold property is Hong Kong, and despite its very popular real estate market with international investors, you cannot own freehold property there. No one can, in fact, because that's just how Hong Kong law works. It's a similar story in China, where all the land is owned by the government. If you're an international buyer who has residency in China, you can actually acquire leasehold property, but as you would expect, the process is quite difficult and you'll need to overcome several legal hurdles in order to acquire leasehold property. Other countries in Asia where you're looking at leasehold-only property ownership include Sri Lanka, Maldives, and most notably Indonesia. Now, Indonesia has a very developed leasehold ownership scheme, which a lot of non-resident owners take advantage of in places like Lombok and Bali. It's a very good system. It's a system that has proven to be successful and popular with overseas buyers, but it is important to note that it is only leasehold property. We'll start our tour around Asia of freehold foreign property ownership in Japan, which has some of the most liberal foreign ownership laws available. In fact, non-residents can own residential property like condominiums and houses, they can own commercial buildings, they can own skyscrapers, they can even own land. The one thing that prevents most people from investing in Japanese real estate is the system, which is all in Japanese. The language barriers seem to be quite daunting, but in terms of being able to own freehold property, Japan is one of the best options in Asia. South Korea, much like Japan, is very open to foreign freehold property ownership. In fact, it is possible to buy just about any type of real estate and have it put in your name on the title deed. It's been a little more than 20 years since the real estate market in South Korea was deregulated and has allowed for foreign freehold property ownership, so the system is very tried and tested. There are a few types of land that foreigners may not own in South Korea. These include land in military installation reservations, land in cultural property protection zones, and land in ecosystem reservation districts. But apart from these, everything else is fair game to foreign freehold property ownership. Taiwan is another country in Asia that is fairly open when it comes to freehold foreign property ownership. Unlike South Korea and Japan, Taiwan does have a few more restrictions in place. Foreigners may own freehold property, including land in Taiwan, so long as they are a resident of an approved country. Basically, Taiwan has a list of 72 countries, and if you're a citizen of one of those countries where there are reciprocal rights established for a Taiwanese person to buy property in that country, then you can own freehold land or freehold residential property in Taiwan. Now, this list is a bit, I don't want to say wonky, but it's not as cut and dry as it seems. For example, if you're an American like myself, only residents or citizens of 42 states are allowed to buy property in Taiwan. So let's say you live in Virginia, you're free to own freehold property there. However, if you're a resident of West Virginia or Mississippi or 8 other states, it's not happening for you.
That means if you are interested in owning freehold property in Taiwan, you're going to want to check that list out, and we have a link to that in the description. Singapore is known for its very open, transparent, and fair property market, and it does have a lot of options for freehold foreign ownership when it comes to real estate. However, it's a bit more segmented than the other countries we've mentioned so far. When I say segregated, I mean the types of housing you can buy are going to be limited. So you can buy private apartments, off-plan apartments, but you can't buy any public housing. Same goes for commercial properties. There are some types of commercial properties a foreigner can own on a freehold basis, and others which cannot be owned. I don't want to say the system is convoluted, it's very clear. It's just if you're going to own property in Singapore, you want to invest in property there, it's important to have a good idea of what you can and cannot own on a freehold basis, because that may influence your decision. Malaysia is another country in Asia that is very open to foreign freehold property ownership. However, a little bit like Singapore, there are some restrictions in place. These restrictions actually vary from state to state, so it depends on where you're looking to buy property. An example of this can be seen in the price floor that's required for non-resident buyers. So for example, if you want to buy a home in Kuala Lumpur, a condominium in KL, the minimum price floor there is 600,000 Malaysian ringgit. In Penang, the price floor is 800,000 Malaysian ringgit, and it does vary a little bit from state to state. So you want to be aware of that when you're looking at Malaysian property, that the minimum requirement or the minimum price requirement for foreigners can vary depending on which part of the country you are looking at. There are a few country-wide restrictions in Malaysia when it comes to freehold foreign property ownership that you're going to want to take note of. Mainly that involves low-cost housing, hence why each state has the price floor for foreign ownership. Additionally, overseas non-residence buyers are not allowed to own agricultural land. So just, make sure if you know where you want to look for property in Malaysia, it's important to understand the state laws governing freehold foreign property ownership there. The next group of countries we're going to look at are your condominium-only countries, or those countries in Asia where foreigners are only allowed to own condominium units on a freehold basis. We will start with Thailand, which is maybe the most well-known of these countries, or the one where foreign owners happen to be the most active historically. In Thailand, foreigners can own condominium units, any condominium unit in the country, so long as the entire residential building is not owned by more than 49% foreigner. So what that means is basically 51% of every condominium building in Thailand has to be owned by Thai buyers, and the other 49% can be sold to non-residents or overseas buyers. This is greater than other countries that you'll see on the list, and is one of the reasons why it's more popular with foreign buyers, is simply because that there are more units on the market. In terms of the other stuff, if you want a villa or anything like that, you're going to have to do it on a leasehold basis. You can check the video in the corner there, and that'll give you some better ideas on what you need to know about buying a leasehold property in Thailand. The Philippines, the restrictions are quite similar to those in Thailand. However, the maximum foreign quota of a single building is 40% and not 49%. This was done because there was obviously some concern from the Philippine government about foreigners sort of taking over the housing market there and raising prices. There's also quite a bit of real local demand there, and that developers don't need to target overseas buyers as much as their Thai counterparts. That being said, the process in the Philippines is pretty straightforward like Thailand, and it's something that's really accessible if you were looking to own a freehold residential condominium unit. Cambodia actually has a higher percentage limit of foreign ownerships in a single building. However, the market there is less developed and less comfortable, I guess you could say, than Thailand, the Philippines, and some of the other markets that are currently condominium only. Overseas buyers can own up to 70%, like I said, 70% of a single building. That regulation has been in place since 2010. The early buyers so far, at least the buyers in the first decade that this legislation has been around, have been mainly Chinese buyers in Sihanoukville on the coast. And then in Phnom Penh, you've seen some overseas activity, some from Singapore, some from China, some from Korea, Hong Kong, who've tried to get in on the floor of the market and waiting for prices to rise. It's pretty clear, like if you wanted to buy a condominium in Cambodia, the process is pretty cut and dry, although it's not necessarily as stable or well known as the Thai market or the Philippine market, which have a longer track record of success.
Freehold property ownership for foreigners is available in Vietnam, although you would have to say this is more of a loophole than a pathway. Currently, the only way for a non-resident buyer to acquire a freehold property in Vietnam is to be married to a Vietnamese partner. This, alongside other regulations in place when it comes to foreign ownership of leasehold property, have seen many investors remain on the sideline, which is a shame, especially considering the potential Vietnam real estate has, and really the potential of the tourism real estate market in the country.
As you know, in Thailand, and to a certain extent, Bali, even though you can't own freehold there, and the Philippines, where you can own freehold property, there is a huge demand for resort properties, for tourism-driven real estate, and many developers are encouraging the government to further relax regulations and it won't be a blanket removal of freehold foreign ownership regulations in Vietnam, but there really are developers encouraging the government to promote foreign ownership and to make it a little bit easier. This process is still ongoing, and it's a story that if you are interested in investing in Vietnam real estate and you want a freehold property in Vietnam, you should definitely pay attention to moving forward. Moving over to the Middle East now, Bahrain is one of a handful of countries where non-resident buyers can own property on a freehold basis. Now, the government has restricted this, and there are only 10 areas in the country where you can purchase freehold real estate, and in most of these cases, these lands are actually reclaimed lands. That being said, it does give you that opportunity to own freehold property in Bahrain. Oman is another country in the Middle East that continues to move towards more opportunities for freehold foreign property ownership. The government has run a visa and property investment program concurrently in a few locations in the country that allowed non-resident real estate buyers to acquire a residential property and receive a visa as part of that, and that property would be available on a freehold basis. Last year, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Planning launched another scheme where the country made 5,000 residential units, mostly condominium or apartments, available to foreign buyers on a freehold basis. That was done to sort of stimulate the local economy and to help boost the property market there, which had been a bit sluggish. It's unknown what effect this has had and what the take-up rate is yet, but that does give foreign investors and non-resident property buyers a path to owning freehold property in Oman. The United Arab Emirates is somewhat like Malaysia in a sense, in that the regulations do vary from each emirate. So for example, in Abu Dhabi, they have it set up to where foreign owners can own property on a freehold basis in select areas in the emirate. Other Other Emirates have no such path to ownership available. It's either all leasehold. And then there's Dubai, which is sort of a mix between freehold and leasehold. And the situation really in all of the UAE continues to evolve. So if you are looking to own freehold real estate there, you have to be careful with where you choose, and it will be very important that you know going in ahead of time what you want and where you want, and if that freehold ownership is possible for you. So that was a brief look at foreign freehold property ownership in Asia. Obviously, we skipped over quite a few countries where they have no mechanism for freehold ownership. If you'd like to know more about foreign ownership in the countries that were included in this video, also comment below and we will work on getting you those videos as well. The important thing I want to stress here is that freehold foreign property ownership is available in Asia, and it's probably the most recommended vehicle for property investors. That being said, it does vary quite a bit from country to country, and it may also not suit what you're looking for. As we mentioned, Thailand is an example of that. If you wanted a villa, you can't buy that on a freehold basis, so it's up to you to make that decision on how you want to proceed. On the other hand, if you are committed to buying a house or you really want that resort property, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, maybe even Malaysia, it's much more accessible there. So I think it's really important for investors and for those looking for property, especially on a retirement basis, to prioritize what's more important to them, because in many countries the leasehold structure will be as sound as the freehold structure. There is just that point in time where you will need to turn the property over. And all things considered, regardless of if you buy freehold or if you buy leasehold, Asia is a great place to own real estate. Many of the markets are pointing upwards. Obviously, COVID-19 has impacted that somewhat, but if you look historically, especially over the past 20 years, there's been a lot of growth in many markets, and that is something that you really want to take note of as you progress with your property buying decision. And if you do have any questions about real estate in Asia, just drop it in the comments and we'll try to answer it if we can. So that does it from me. I'm Cheyenne Hollis, and this is Interesting Asia.